as we're all gathering.
Hello.
It's an impressive array of
Hello.
faces.
Good morning.
And voices. Yeah, quite impressive group we have here.
Happy Earth Day, everyone.
Exactly. Happy Earth Day. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, as always, we have a very full agenda, and I'm really grateful that everybody has shown up promptly. So that tells me that this was high on your priority list for today. And as always, we'll do our best to get us through the agenda. You know, it's by the allotted time, get us out of here at noon. I know for some people that's not nearly enough time to talk about these issues. For others, it's like plenty. So in recognition of that, I just wanted to start off by saying, you know, we absolutely read every comment that comes in through the chat. We take account of that. If you have burning issues that you want us to pay attention to, you can email Devin. You know, he's sort of the point of contact for the district on this project. So, you know, avail yourselves of those resources and speak up as you feel inclined as we open our discussion times. Be respectful though, and try to keep your comments short, concise, to the point. And if somebody's already said what you wanted to say, you can just pipe in and say ditto, or, you know, yes, 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 exclamation point. That'll help us keep moving. I would encourage everybody to stay muted unless you're speaking. Use the raise hand feature if you want to make a comment, or try to, it's a little difficult for me to monitor 30 little thumbnails to see who's waving at me, but if you're having issues getting recognized, you know, just chime in, and I'll try to get around. So that's, with that said, I think everybody's probably pretty used to the Zoom functions, and again, thank you for your respectful participation. Perfectly fine to disagree with something that's been said, just do so respectfully. And let me just do a quick agenda overview. I think Devin sent this out very recently, so it has the latest version, and I'll just tell you that we have this standing item on our agenda. We open the meeting with some announcements from the Park District, anything that's of interest that we want the group to know about. We spend just a little time reminding folks of what we did last time, some reflections on the previous meeting, and noting that, as always, we're building this really terrific library of resources on the web page. And so I think that's definitely a value that we wanted to just highlight. So we will just spend a few minutes on that, but really get into the meat of the conversation. And this morning we added an agenda item because we know there have been some recent issues around trail conflicts that have percolated up, and there might be some interest in you know, making a statement about those or asking some questions about those. So we have just a sort of a general open discussion time. This is also in recognition of the fact that, you know, we really are here to hear from you. You know, the district is obviously really interested in your opinions and questions. We may not be able to answer all those questions today, so please understand that we will take those questions in, and if there's something that we can do a little research and get back to you on, we will do that. The main part of today is focused on equestrian perspectives. We've heard in the past from the hiker's perspective and the bicyclist perspective. Today we're going to turn to the equestrians, and after just a couple of minutes from the Park District on framing the issues, we're going to hear from a few folks representing the equestrian perspective and share their ideas. Again, we're interested in, you know, what are the goals of equestrians as they're out in the district lands? What are some of the issues that they perceive, and even perhaps what are some solutions that they have in mind, just to set us up for the breakout group discussions. 40 minutes there to go over some issues and goals. And also importantly, I think the third question that we pose is, you know, what do you think would improve the trail user experience for equestrians and those sharing the trails? So part of the value of this group is getting some collaborative thinking on, you know, what management strategies you think would be helpful to reduce conflict and to optimize the trail experience. We'll close this afternoon or this morning, as we usually do, with just a highlight of what's coming next. You'll note that there's a new meeting being proposed in July, so we would have a June, July, August, and September of this group. So adding a little bit to your docket, but we think there's enough content for us to use the extra meeting. And as I said, we'll try to close out by 12. So Brian, if you've been able to stick around this long, I'm going to turn it to you. I know you only have a few minutes with us. Just anything that you'd like to share from the Park District perspective.
Well, thanks, Lou, and thank you everybody for participating in this. I'm going to do a little welcome, but I do have to jump off. I'm Brian Holt. I'm the Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS at the Park District. And I just want to say that this group is, the Park District really values this group. We have been receiving a lot of input, as I'm sure you can all expect, on our trails, on trail conflicts, on the need to open up new parklands. And so the input that we received from this group to date has been great. So thank you all for participating. I do want to acknowledge the times that we're in. There's been a lot going on nationally and locally, and that's really has really influenced our work at the Park District with regards to how are we providing equitable, safe, and welcoming access to our parklands. And I think that's really kind of a key theme that should be kept in this group as we're talking. I will say, as I look around, I see a lot of older and whiter faces in this group, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do want to make sure that that we're hearing all voices, and that everybody feels comfortable to speak up and please participate in the conversation, and also recognize the position that you're speaking from and any privilege that you might be bringing to the conversation. At the Park District, what's going on here? We are transitioning to a new general manager. We do have Sabrina Landreth, who was the former city administrator from City of Oakland, has come and joined as our new general manager here. She's been on, I think, about a month now, and has been great thus far. So we're very pleased to have Sabrina on board. And we continue to see just increases, 30 to 50% increases in our trail use, and that's across the board. Certainly in cyclists and hikers, and continue to hear about additional trail conflicts. And so there's been a lot of referral to this group and information that's in this group for people to sort of get up to speed and to provide their input. I will say that it's for staff, we have begun to look at different pilot projects that we could implement in different parks, perhaps in Briones or in other places. And that's and different education campaigns that need to be done. So that's based off of a lot of input that we have received thus far. So I also know that there's been engagement amongst the users in the field, the equestrians and cyclists starting to meet together and talking about things that work. That's awesome, and that was really our intent and our hope for this group, is that our trail users can get together and start to work and provide some suggestions on what they would like to see implemented. So thank you all for being here. Again, we really appreciate your input, and really hope that you can, help us work to expand access to our parklands, and work on opening up those 40,000 acres or so that we have land banked appropriately and in a way that's safe and sustainable for our resources. So appreciate everybody being here, and with that, I'll turn it back over to.
Thanks so much, Brian. Really appreciate your offering those welcoming remarks. Wanted to just take a quick note that our website that hopefully everybody has access to, I'm going to drop the address of that in case you have misplaced it into the chat. So this is our homepage, if you will, for the working group, and it contains the meeting schedule and also documentation from our previous meetings. And so in this part of the agenda, I just wanted to remind us that last time we heard, or we focused on the bicyclist perspective. Again, most of these issues we could probably spend an entire day on and have a good, rich in-service, but we've allotted just a couple of hours, to do this. So last time we heard from Scott Bertelbaugh and Helen sorry, somebody Snyder, I can't remember, about, just to launch us off with some perspectives. And then we had a really robust set of breakout group discussions where we talked through some of those issues and also identified some strategies. Those strategies and those ideas about how to cope with issues and how to maximize or optimize the trail experience for everyone, those are being collected and collated as kind of these potential strategies from this group that we want to revisit when we get to the end of our process and take a look at what we've brainstormed and what we think are thank you, Helena Gilbert Snyder. Thank you. Thank you, Amelia. So those strategies are things that we'll come back to, revisit, and discuss amongst ourselves what we think are the most promising management strategies to put forward as the work of this group. So just again, a reminder that there are lots of resources based on user groups, the equestrians, the dog use of the parks, conservation, mountain biking, a lot of really great stuff. And if you have some things that you'd like to share with this group, please, again, email Devin and we'll make sure we get it up there. So I didn't want to spend too much time unless anybody had something lingering from last time that you feel related to the meeting that we had last time, or any difficulty you're having accessing those resources. Just a moment. Otherwise, we can move on to our important next item. Okay. Again, use the raise hand if you need access. So I think the next agenda item is going to be something I imagine folks are going to want to weigh in on. And I guess, Devin, I don't think we discussed how to open this up, but I know that you shared with me this week that there have been some user conflicts that have kind of been elevated or percolated within the district. And I thought maybe that would be a good place for us to at least open up the conversation. So putting you on the spot just to kind of get us launched here. And we have about 15, or it looks like about 10 minutes now for the floor to be open, and anybody can, raise their hand. So Devin.
Great, Lou. Thanks, and welcome everybody. Yeah, since we've met in the last 2 months, there has been a real increase in trail conflict that gets reported to us as staff. And there have been public safety reports and public safety actions that have taken place recently that I know are of concern. There's been articles in the press that I know are of concern. So we just wanted to create a space in the agenda for anyone to talk about what's been going on in your communities, on your trails and your experience here at the Park District.
Oops, sorry. Okay. Great. This is also, I should say, partly in response to folks just saying, yeah, we want more time to talk. So I see one raised hand. Who is it? Why
Jim Hansen.
Thank you, Amanda. It's not showing up on my thing. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, Devin. I think it could be helpful to hear what's been reported. Could you give us some details?
Sure, and Captain Breed, if you want to add anything. I know that recently, for example, in Briones, there's been some public safety action around mountain biking, and there have also just been a flood of emails from equestrians, not just at Briones, but around the district, that we've gotten as staff around trail conflict. And I think there's just, in general, a sense that something new needs to be done, because what is happening now on the trails when it gets crowded is unsustainable.
Right.
I can add a few more comments, Lou.
Oh, hi. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone back in this group. This is a very important group for us, and moving forward, as has been touched on by Devin and Brian. I know we've been having some other additional meetings that were talked about with some potential pilot programs that we're very excited about moving forward. But in relation to the issues, the question of the issues that we're seeing related to trail conflicts, it goes to I think you can attribute it to a lot of the new users, but also existing users that are all trying to use the same trails at the same time and not following our established rules and regulations for calling out. We've received a lot of reports of large groups of mountain bikers that aren't calling out and yielding to both the equestrian units or equestrians and hikers, which is been a bulk of the complaints that we received. And Brioni's Park is not unique in the district. It continues to get a lot of heavy use, and we see a lot of those conflicts because of the popularity of that park. Even before the pandemic, we did receive a lot of complaints over the years for illegal mountain bike use for single track trails. And we work closely with park operations and ASD to ensure that we address those and get signage out there. Part of that's education as well, trying to ensure that everyone knows where it's appropriate to ride and where it's not. And part of the education component is issuing citations. And we've worked hard to educate the public on what is acceptable and what's not. There's been a lot of new signage and existing signage at Brioni's in particular. And we have sent our special enforcement unit out there recently, and they've issued quite a few citations to people that have disregarded the signage and the existing trails and rules that have been established.
Great. Thank you. Morris had his hand up and wanted to give you an opportunity. We can't hear you yet, Morris.
I was just going to say that
We have an echo. I don't know what's.
yeah, given the increase in usage during the pandemic, there's just been so much of an increase all around, as has been noted, and it's gotten to the point where there have even been instances where user groups outside of any of the ones represented here have started to appear on the trail. I was in Tilden Park and noticed that the entrance gate to the equestrian camp there was broken in half. And when I notified the park supervisor that somebody had backed into it, he told me, no, nobody backed into it. They drove right through it with a 4x4, went up the single track trail up to Upper Big Springs Trail, followed Seaview to the steam trails, and hopped over a boulder to get by the gate out there into the parking lot and escaped into the night. When I told the president of Metropolitan Horsemen's Association about that, she mentioned that in Anthony Chabot Park at the Stone Bridge, there was a group of equestrians and 2 4x4s came tumbling down, or not tumbling, but rolling down the Jackson Grade Trail from the Clyde Woolridge staging area and startled their horses. So it's kind of like everybody has just so much pent up energy. And I think that, to a certain extent, a lot of this is going to abate as other possibilities of things to do, become available. I was also noticing the other nights, very similarly in Richmond, people are shooting off tons of fireworks all of a sudden in the middle of April. What's with that? It's the same thing. People are pent up energy, and it reflects on the trails as well.
Right. Thanks, Morris, for those comments. Jim, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Officer Breed. Could you just let us know what is a citation? What's the cost on a citation? I'm just also curious if there's any information on the pilot projects so that we have an idea what's happening. Thanks.
Sure, I can do that. So just there was another question as well. I'm getting an echo. Does everyone have their microphone off? Okay, we'll try that again. So yes, I can answer that question, Jim. First of all, there was a question by Mary regarding some of the actual conflicts. Yes, there are a lot of actual conflicts that are going on out there. The bulk of the reports that we are getting are from the equestrian community that are reporting that. That's where are identifying the dates and times where these conflicts are happening. So with that, we gather that information and try to do enforcement based upon the intelligence that we receive, putting our officers out in the parks when those reported incidents are occurring. And we have been able to address quite a few of those, as I alluded to earlier in Briones. The citations, the actual fines of the citations, that's a kind of a more unique question, because the district sets a fine for ordinance 38 violations somewhere in the neighborhood of $50. But once each individual court jurisdiction has associated fees that go on top of that. So it is not uncommon for a citation to range anywhere from $300 to $500, depending on which court jurisdiction it is.
Sorry. Adela had her hand up, and then I see Norman, and then I think we'll probably have to park the remainder of this for a later time. But go ahead, Adela.
Yeah, just in response to Mary's question, I know there's been a call out to the trail running community, letting them know that the volunteer safety patrol has been activated and encouraging people to report conflicts. So people are more aware of how to report conflicts.
Great. Thanks for that. And Norm, I think we'll make yours the last comment for now. Go ahead.
Well, it's more a question, and maybe for Lance, and that is, so obviously you don't know yet, but in the past, or what's been the experience with you how many citations are issued, how many actually get found to be a conviction, how many are dismissed for either lack of evidence, or that, for example, the police officer can't show up on the day that's set for the hearing, so the judge or whoever's hearing it will dismiss the citation. I mean, what's the actual conviction rate?
Well, thanks, Norman, for the question. That's a tough question to answer in terms of a conviction rate. I can't give you a percentage, but what I can tell you is this is why it's so imperative for us at Public Safety to work with our partners in operations and ASD to ensure that when we do identify illegal trails, that we get them signed appropriately. And when we identify areas where illegal activity is occurring, then we can get out there to educate the public, and then, if appropriate, issue a citation. So it's kind of it's all a partnership throughout the district. We're all working together. So if we didn't do that, if a trail wasn't signed appropriately, then it would be harder for our officers to go out there and enforce those kind of activities, because it's not posted. And that's one of the things that a judge would ask the officer, or ask the person that is violating the rule or the ordinance if there was clear signage. So again, we ensure that all of those things are taken in consideration prior to issuing a citation.
Great. Well, it's a great information exchange here, and I think that one takeaway might be just what Brian started with, is just the increased interest and use of trails. The pandemic has definitely contributed to people being more appreciative of the outdoors and taking advantage of that, and just again, more pressure to open up new trails, and conflicts are going to happen, and as more use happens, more conflicts will be happening. And so we want to learn from this. And I think, as somebody mentioned in the chat, we do want this to be a welcoming place for everyone. And we recognize, new users are coming to the parks. They don't always understand what the expectations are, what they might encounter. So educating and creating both a welcoming environment and a safe environment, I think is the challenge here. So it sounds like having this time for us to have sort of an open forum is really, really good. We're going to turn our attention, and we'll try to invest that into future meetings, and so we'll take that under advisement for that. Our focus today is on equestrians and what their goals are in using the parks. sort of maybe some of the technical issues that they that are requirements that they have as they enjoy the parks, and what some of the issues from their perspectives are, and then we have that the breakouts to talk through some of those issues and conflicts and come up with our own ideas about strategy. So I'm going to turn this to Sean just for a quick Park District framing of this, and then we'll turn it over to our representatives to share their ideas. So Sean.
Good morning, everyone. I won't talk long this time. Sean Dugan, Trails Program Manager. Today you are going to hear from a lot about horses and the perception that folks that ride horses have. I'm going to share my screen very quickly here. And I'm going to do, can you all see that? I'm assuming you can. So just real quick, again, this is our trail system of roughly 1,330 miles of trail. Within that, we have 200 miles of unpaved trails that are not roads that we are mainly focusing on in this group. As a reminder, for some reason, there we go. Out of that green wedge of the narrow trails that we are talking about, it's roughly 200 miles. You can see in the middle there that horseback riding is allowed on roughly 57% of all of our trails, or of all of those narrow trails. My bad, sorry. It is in the middle. You know, obviously hikers are allowed on all of them, and horses are allowed on over twice as much as bicycles are. If you go to our website, you can see if you want more information on what types of facilities the Park District provides and things. You can go to this link here, and I can provide it in the chat if you'd like as well. But essentially, the Park District has facilities for staging areas for horses, horse arenas, horse boarding barns, facilities for camping, and facilities that provide horse riding lessons and day camps. If you look on this web page as well, this is a list of the parks that the Park District identifies as equestrian parks, and that's Anthony Chabot, Del Valle, Diablo Foothills, Las Trampas, Martinez Shoreline, Reinhardt, Redwood, Sunol, and Tilden. So as users that ride horses know that this is what we recognize as equestrian parks. You can ride horses in other parks, and there are stables around other parks and things, but these are the parks that have facilities specifically for horseback riding. And if you're not a horseback rider and you are a mountain biker or a hiker or a dog walker, you should be aware that these parks are likely going to have increased equestrian and horseback riding activities. Why is it important? You'll hear more about this, and I'll keep it short, but a horse has a mind of its own. You have the rider and you have the horse. Horseback riding requires a certain trail design. Certain things prevent horseback riding. Low hanging limbs on trees, steps, too narrow of a trail, drop offs, things like that. Sight lines. A horse can range between 900 and 2,000 pounds, although 2,000 pounds would be like a Clydesdale, a very large horse. I think on average they're between 900 and 1,500. That's a very heavy animal that is historically a prey animal. For 60 million years, it's survived by running. So when it gets spooked, that's what it does. So add a 150-pound or some odd size rider on top, you have a very sensitive situation. Horses have wide, large eyes. While that allows them, they're kind of on the sides of their heads. It allows them to see a wide range of things, but most of it is with one eye. So their depth perception is somewhat poor, and they can't see as far as humans can see. They have difficulty seeing what's right in front of them and behind them. When I say in front of them, I mean by their front legs. They have a tremendously good sense of hearing and smell. But the point here is that if you sneak up on a horse or you're coming very quickly to a horse, they may not know what you are, and you may scare them and force them to run. So this requires a horseback riding and interaction with horses requires a higher level of trail etiquette. Everybody's supposed to yield to horses. You're supposed to stop, stand, and speak. when you see a horse. And we're working on some etiquette to publish at the Park District on this. But you're going to hear more about this today, and I'll stop talking. But please appreciate the perspective that you'll hear from the horseback riders, in that they're somewhat taking a risk when they're riding their horses out there. No matter how much you train a horse, it's still a wild animal. And with that, I'll turn it over to who's speaking first. Thanks.
Yeah, Sean, I think Sean is going to introduce our speakers for today. Go ahead.
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to introduce Devin.
No, I'm going to. Thanks, Lou. Thanks, Sean, for that framing. I want to introduce Amelia Marshall, who is a very active member of our working group, and we're very grateful that she's put together a presentation with two members, longtime members of the horse and equestrian communities, and she's also joined at the end by Gary Fitz. So Amelia, we'll let you begin, and Amanda will be running your slides.
Well, hello there, everyone. Good morning. So glad that we're all meeting to talk about this very important issue. I believe our slide deck is set up so that our first speaker will be Marie Grisham, who is a very valuable member of the California State Horsemen's Association, who is right up there in the top performers when it comes to the trail miles that she covers. And she's also a leader in desensitization bomb-proofing training for horses at the Tri-Cities Arena in Martinez. And so Marie, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, well, as Amelia said, my name is Marie Grisham, and thank you for having me this morning. I am a longtime horse owner and rider. I am a member of Tri-Cities Horsemen's Association and California State Horsemen's Association. I'm actually the state chair for the Trail Riders Awards program, where we track trail usage throughout the state, and riders are awarded based upon the number of hours they ride, not necessarily the miles, but the number of hours they ride, so anybody can do it. And so we have a database with all that information in it. I'm a little behind right now because of some family issues, but that is available for use. So I guess we're on to the next slide, Amelia. Okay. So I'm going to address about 3 areas today. And the first one is going to be equestrian access to parks. I know a lot of people assume that people board their horses next to parks and they just ride in. That's not necessarily true. Many of us, matter of fact, the majority of us do not. I have my horse at home. That's my rig there on the left. And we have to trailer into parks. Many people do, and a lot of parks don't have boarding stables next to them. Wildcat doesn't, for instance, Point Pinole doesn't, a lot of them don't. So what becomes an issue is getting into the parks. Today's trailers are long and tall, okay? An average truck and trailer nowadays are a minimum of 30 feet long and 10 feet high. Most are larger. My rig is 45 feet overall, and that's average for today. Think about it. Not all park entrances can accommodate the larger vehicles. So they're not designed with trucks and trailers in mind. Some trees are too low, the entrances are blocked, or they're designed for car entrances. So the middle, these pictures are actually, the middle one is from Wildcat Canyon. You'll see where used to be a tree in that planter, and the tree died, and we were hoping they're going to take it out. It is almost impossible to get a trailer through there. I can barely squeak through, and I have 40 years of driving experience in big rigs. So that park, because of that, the park is not being used as much as it could be, and it's a beautiful entrance into the park system. The one on the right is a low-hanging limb, branch, tree, whatever you want to call it, over the entrance to Brioni's on the Martinez side, and you can't get under it. I don't know if you had a fire, how a fire truck would get even under this or through that other entrance. These are just a couple examples. Next one, please, Amelia. Okay, so also issues we have once we get in the park is that trailer parking. Few parks have dedicated trailer parking, and this results in parked cars restricting our parking. Some parks have no trailer parking, or what was there was removed. For example, Tilden has no trailer parking. We have to use, and used to have trailer parking at Inspiration Point, that was removed. Carquinez Strait Park, the same thing, trailer parking was removed. Last week, I rode at Wildcat, which had designated parking. I helped put that parking in there several years ago. I actually worked with the engineer to do that. They put special footing in there for us. We had signs up. We had, all kinds of signage. It was great if you could get in there. I was there last week and the signs have been taken down and now there's cars parked there. I was barely able to squeeze my rig in, only because I boast about myself. I'm a pretty good driver. But my friends who were coming with me, there was no room for them and they had to find another entrance. And so it's not good. I was very surprised when I pulled in there, and because I had just ridden there the last part of February. I was out of town in March. So I ride there a lot. And I don't know why they took them out. Actually, Sean, I sent you an email on this. Good news was I was also at Point Pinole on Sunday, and they are putting in designated parking, which is great because, as you know, now we used to park there, no problem. Now, because of the heavy usage of the park, you can't get in there anymore unless you get there very early. So that was good news to hear. So we're happy to hear that. Whoops, go back, Amelia, I'm not done yet. Okay, equestrians pay extra for parking. I didn't know if you guys know that. We have to pay for our trailers. And then once we get there, we hope that there's room to park. And then we worry about being blocked in when returning from a ride. We're careful not to block cars when we pull in, and we would ask the same courtesy of people using it. The right side picture is from Brioni's on the Bear Creek side. And I have actually parked like this, come back, and there's been cars parked up against me, backed up against me, so I could not pull out all along the side. Sorry about that, I have no control over this. Okay, the other thing is trucks and trailers. Give me 40 acres to turn this rig around. We need adequate space to turn into and out of parking areas and to turn around if necessary. Basically the same amount of room as a fire truck. Please think about our needs when you're designing parking and trailheads. That's my thing. Okay, all right, next slide, Amelia. Sorry. Okay, so one of the other things I was asked, because I ride extensively in many different areas throughout the United States, and they asked me to come up with solutions I have found in other parks. Well, the good news is there's a lot of them here in California. The main one is separate trails for equestrians and or hikers. And some examples of those are the American River Parkway in Sacramento. They have a fabulous system up there where the equestrian trails are totally separate from the bicycles, a portion of them. And sometimes you do have to ride alongside because of the terrain and stuff, but you'll see that they have adequate space on either side for equestrians to ride. And then once you get off onto the equestrian trails, they are generally single file or narrow trails along the river. Beautiful, beautiful up there. If you guys have never been, I really recommend it. Folsom Lake has separate trails at Falcon Crest and North Granite Bay coming out of those trailheads. And in Lake Orville State Park up there, the Dan Beebe Trail, a portion of that is also separate. So it can be done. It just takes a little more work maybe, but it can be done and it's a very safe solution. Okay, next slide. So the other ones are uphill trails for cyclists. In the Marin Headlands has several examples of this, one of which is Middle Green Gulch. You see the trail on the bottom left corner. That is Middle Green Gulch from up above on Coyote Road, Coyote Trail. And you'll see why it makes sense for it to be uphill only. Because if you had a bicyclist coming down behind you on some of these trails, it could be disastrous. Trails are designed to slow users down. For instance, Diaz Ridge, it's also in the Marin Headlands, has sharp turns on it. And it is, has fences that of course fit the terrain, but prevents people from cutting across. This not only slows down the bicyclists, but also the equestrians, because it's beautiful up there. And you know, you want to go a little faster, maybe sometimes, not me, but some people do. It also slows them down. So, and then no cyclists on narrow hazardous trails. The one on the right, that is Heather Cutoff, also again in the Marin Headlands. You can see how treacherous it could be if there was a speeding motorcycle coming down, or even hikers sometimes are, it gets a little tricky. I know a lot of people say, well, then don't ride those, but why? I mean, why shouldn't we be able to ride them, you know, in a safe manner? And if you have a good trail horse, it's usually not an issue. But why take a chance? Okay, next one. Okay, so some of the other solutions that I have seen is bells for bikes. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but we're talking about bells like a goat bell or a bear bell with a constant sound, not the kind that's, you know, you stick on your bike and you ring as you come up behind somebody and watch them jump. We don't want those. We want something constant that you know, people and horses can hear. People can hear bells from a few hundred yards away, a few hundred yards away, and horses can hear them for up to a quarter mile or more. Okay. Actually, when I ride with my son and his dogs, my horse has only got one eye. We have a goat bell on the dog, just so that the horses can tell where they are and they don't spook if they come running at them for some reason. So CCMB, which is the Central Coast Concerned Mountain Bikers, and FATRAC, which is the Folsom Auburn Trail Riders Action Coalition, have implemented successful programs in Montana Del Oro State Park, San Luis Obispo Open Space, Lake Folsom, and Auburn State Recreation Area. The bells are left at bell boxes at locations deemed to be of high impact with other trail users, for instance, top of a steep hill, the bottom of a steep hill, blind corners, things like that. Cyclists take a bell from one box and leave it at the next one. And cyclists going the opposite direction do the same thing, replenishing the bell boxes. They continue to expand the programs, and they are funded by local businesses and by users' purchase of the bells for their individual use. Okay, next one.
Marie, if you could wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, wrap up. Okay, so can we all just get along? We used to have trail users, joint trail users events. Those haven't had those for several years now, and we'd like to start to get those again. I think it would be very beneficial. Okay, and then one more slide, and then we're done. Okay. Any events where users can learn how to interact safely and courteously. Non-equestrians get the opportunity to ride a horse to experience that, quote, they have a mind of their own. Non-cyclists get an opportunity to ride a bike and learn how they stop, and etc. Trail users learn how to safely approach an equestrian. Hikers and dog handlers learn why they should not hide behind a bush, and why dogs need to be leashed or under control, and not just for equestrians. And then let's make some friends along the way. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Go ahead and just jump in, Elizabeth. We'll. Well, sorry, Ellen.
Okay, I had to unmute. Just a little bit of background. I grew up in the East Bay, and I had a horse in junior high and high school, and used to ride in Redwood Regional Park and Chabot Park. Kept my horse up on Skyline. And then I took 30 years to go to college, raise my kids, and have a career, and started riding again about 30 years ago. I want to talk about what the equestrians would like in the parks. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about how the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation, Walnut Creek Open Space Trail Committee, the thinking we went through to come up with the recommendations that we came up with for Walnut Creek Open Space Shared Trails. So the first slide, wait, I have to get rid of a chat thing on my screen here. Whoops, I blew it up. Okay. The main thing, I mean, or I should say very, very important to equestrians is being safe on the trail. As a kid, you know, many, many years ago, we had very safe trails. They didn't have any man-made high-speed vehicles that would startle the horse. There were kids on the trails. As a 10-year-old, I rode by myself all the time. And you could take out a new horse, and it was a calm enough experience so that you could develop that new horse into a seasoned horse. As Marie said, there were a lot more barns near the trails back there. And so most people could ride out of the barn and onto a safe trail. We had room to trot, canter, and even gallop, which is for non-equestrians. A gallop is a high-speed canter, and but it is also a controlled gait. And the thing about a horse is you can stop a horse in a relatively short distance. A bicycle is more apt to skid on the trail, whereas a horse actually stops very quickly. As I said, we rode by ourselves confidently because the chances of something going wrong were extremely rare. The people we met were relaxed and friendly. They were mostly hikers. And we had time to think and meditate and just kind of enjoy nature on our horse. Okay, what we deal with today. These are our present day realities. Equestrians are the most likely to get hurt if something goes wrong. And things that move fast and directly at a horse can be perceived as dangerous. Thank you for the earlier comments about horses and how they perceive things, and the fact that they flee when they feel endangered. We are very aware that if things go wrong on the trail, it's the equestrian that's going to get injured. And sitting on a 1,000-pound animal with a mind of its own can go from peaceful and meditative to pretty exciting very fast. Bikes are on the same trail and they move directly at the horse, either coming directly toward the horse in the front or attacking the horse from behind. They appear suddenly around a curve, over a rise, or from behind shrubbery. And that's why the line of sight is so important on shared trails. A horse may spin, which means do a 180 and bolt and go right over a steep bank when it gets startled. And that's why there needs to be room on the side of the trails so that people can both move off the trail, and also if a horse does panic, the horse doesn't go over the side of the trail. Having bikes on every trail makes equestrians be on constant alert and watching out for bicycles all the time. Since, well, just a little bit back, we have to ride now on constant alert. Increased vigilance becomes kind of essential for any ride that you take. And part of a big reason for that is because there are bikes on all the trails, even the trails that are marked no bikes. So next slide. So what equestrians need is really for everybody to obey the rules. But since there are some that don't, we are asking for increased resources to be put on reinforcement. Many bikers are polite and nice, and I really do thank the biking communities for the efforts that they're putting into educating bicyclists about stop and say hello and those kind of programs. I also understand that the biking communities cannot control every biker, and that's why we need consistent enforcement from the park district. The few scofflaws that are endangering some equestrians are also giving the entire biking community a bad name. We need all the users to obey the rules, which, and this is the big one, includes only riding on designated trails. Single tracks aren't designed for speed, visibility, and room, and that puts us in danger, and that creates a lot of tension. Next slide. Okay, here are horses that are either sworn officer horses from various police districts and volunteers from East Bay Regional Park District. Sorry for the doorbell. Going through some desensitized training. This is the balloon walk, and what it is the balloons flying in the wind and flapping at your horse. The other one is a helicopter that is landed and the blades are not spinning at this point. But this kind of training is desensitizing, and it gives the horse a chance to look at the object because the object is stationary, get comfortable with it, and you develop trust with your horse. So the horse learns to trust you and you learn to trust the horse. It is a partnership. And not every horse has the opportunity to go through this kind of training. Let's see the next slide too. Okay, here is again more of this training where you've got this giant ball that the wind blows around in the arena, but it's not 15 miles an hour, and it's also sort of a random track. It isn't on a trail as on the same trail as the horse. So again, it moves, it's big, it's unfamiliar, but horses can study it, get used to it, and get comfortable with it. The other one is one of those floppy clowns that they blow up with air, and so it waves around in the air. Again, it doesn't come at the horse. And so that's a big difference in what a horse has a chance to get used to. Okay, and next slide. Okay, so for the Walnut Creek open space, let me give you some information on the process we went through there. It was about a 2-year process. We had representatives from the user groups, and because the conflicts have been accelerating over the last 20 years, we got together and much like what's going on here, trying to decide what we could agree on, what we could try. And the solutions we came up with didn't make everyone happy, but we all agreed that what's going on right now is not working, so we need to try something new. The bicyclists wanted trails that were designed for bikes. Walnut Creek Open Space has a lot of steeper trails, and when it was formed, it was acknowledged that the steep trails aren't really good for cycling. The equestrians want to feel safe on the trails, and basically we feel safe if the rules are being followed because the rules were set up to keep everyone safe. The environmentalists wanted restoration of the damaged areas and preservation of the areas that are still there. And one of the goals of the Walnut Creek Open Space is a balance between environmental preservation and safe recreation. So next slide. So what we agreed on was to build a new bicycle flow trail in the Lime Ridge area. Those plans are still being worked out. There are people that agree with it and disagree with it. And so we're still talking about details there. We came up with standard for shared trails, and they include line of sight, room to get off the trail, no trails on really steep banks. So there are standards for shared trails. There is a process to go through if a user group wants to change the designated use of a trail. They basically go to staff and say, here's how we'd like to change it. Staff looks at it and says, okay, it seems okay in this area, but this area needs a visibility, has a visibility problem, a steepness problem, something, and they will look at whether they can redirect the trail or mitigate it in some way. But there is a process to go through. They are talking about having some protected nature trails, and those would be absolutely, they may be for hikers only, they may allow horses only, but it would be designated as a nature trail. Signage and trail user education is being increased. The rangers are out there, I talked to them, they're exhausting themselves, putting up barriers, re-putting up barriers that get taken down. Trying to restore areas and block off the trails that are have been created illegally. They're still having problems. They'll put a barrier up and the bike simply ride around the barrier to get back on the illegal trail, but we're working on it. The other thing, and I don't see that one on the list. Oh, it's the second to the bottom. This one is the rangers have been given the authority to write citations for offenders. They're going to be trained by the police department, and they will now have the ability to cite offenders. They did not have that ability before. It was known and taken advantage of. So they're going to be increasing enforcement in Walnut Creek open space. I think it's important to remember when people say that they are taxpayers and they're entitled to use the parks also, the answer is absolutely yes. Everyone is entitled to use the parks as they are designed to be used. And to introduce four-wheelers and things that the park wasn't designed to be used that way, that's a whole different question. But I think people should remember that every person has 100% access to the park. It is simply whether you choose to ride a bicycle, a horse, or hike, or bring a dog. There may be restrictions on all of those assets, but we all have the ability to hike on any trail in the park. So we personally are not being denied access. So
I want to just step in here for a second and just note that it's 11 o'clock and we did want to move into our breakout groups soon.
I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. So I don't know how many other slides there are, but we could.
No, I think that was, the last one, if I can just do the last slide. Basically, the success of what we're trying in open space is, does this work to give the cyclists a trail that is dedicated to the kind of riding that they have asked for? And the success, frankly, depends on everyone following the rules, giving the bike something and everyone else getting something in return. Okay, thank you.
So Amelia, bring us home. And I think actually there was one other presenter. So if we can move through these slides pretty quickly.
Thank you, Lou. Great. Well, as Adela Ho mentioned in the chat, there are three principles here. There is education, there is engineering, there is enforcement. And Marie and Elizabeth have done a terrific job of outlining the issues that equestrians are facing. So, Devin, next slide. When the Trail Users Working Group started up last summer, we conducted outreach to 200, 300 equestrians, and we conducted a little survey to get their feedback on what issues are important. We asked them what regional parks they ride in, and you can see this list pretty much echoes Sean's list of the major equestrian parks. Next slide, please. So let's talk about narrow trails. Somewhere along the line, a non-equestrian committee probably came up with the idea of a narrow multi-use trails. Now, in theory, it sounds pretty good. You can build more trail miles per dollar if they're narrow and multi-use, but the problem is that the public does not perceive them as multi-use. When you build narrow trails, they pretty rapidly become bicycle trails. We asked the general question of our survey respondents, should bikes and horses be on the same narrow trails? And hey, equestrians are a pretty independent-minded lot, and it's amazing if you find general agreement on any issue. But here we have near unanimity with one undecided person saying that no, we do not want bikes and horses on the same narrow trails. This is a general question. What's a narrow trail? Ordinance 38 says less than 8 feet. The state handbook does not specify a minimum width at all. Other agencies have other standards, but you can see in the Crockett Hills picture, this is signed to be a multi-use trail, but in practical use, only bicycles go there. The Bills Trail in Marin is an interesting case. It goes from the Devil's Gulch Horse Camp in Samuel P. Taylor Park to Mount Barnaby at Point Reyes, Golden Gate National Seashore. And so the bicycling community went to court to gain access to that trail. About 2 years ago, they started rebuilding. The state park system rebuilt it with pinch points and bulb outs, but it has been largely abandoned by equestrians since then, since it's perceived as a bike trail. Next slide, Devin. So here we have Ponte Ridge Trail in Marin County. Now, taking a horse on a bike trail is not for the faint-hearted, but we have a gentleman from the Marin Search and Rescue who gave it a 0-star review. He says that you're constantly looking out for bikes, you're negotiating with the other users, they don't expect to see a horse there, and you're spending all your time looking for bulb outs to pull off the trail. So our survey was presented with the design standard from the state handbook and asked, would you take your horse on one of these trails? 73% said they would not. We also asked them whether bicycles should be on their own separate trails, and 83%, an even larger majority, said, yeah, give the bikes their own trails. Next slide, Devin. So fire roads historically have worked pretty well for multi-use. Here's Elizabeth Hudson on her wonderful horse Impulse, who is a certified police-trained patrol horse, but he is still nervous around bicycles. Here on a fire road in Diablo Foothills Park, Impulse is taking a very good look at a bicycle that a very nice man stopped to allow him to check out. When you've got groups of mountain bikers, and there are frequently large groups, they have to pass the typically between 2 and 6 horses generally. It can be kind of crowded, so you really need space to get away from the bikes. Next slide, please. But even fire roads lose their utility for multi-use when you've got things like illegal mountain bike racing going on. Last month, we did not have a situation that was very good. We've been told by our members who are in the El Cerrito High School Mountain Biking Club as coaches that those athletes will be educated and sign codes of conduct, but not everybody got the memo on that. So we've got the Piedmont High School coach going to the media and telling the students to go out and race in Anthony Chabot and Redwood Parks and Joaquin Miller in Oakland. So this came to our attention when some people's days were ruined by being blown past on the trail by teenagers on bikes. And you can tell when they report their times on the Strava app that they are in excess of the speed limit. Next slide, please. And now we have e-bikes. I think this was meant as a joke here, this website, how to ride your bike illegally. But at the same time, you can't deny that a subset of the bicycling community are fond of the outlaw ideology. And that may explain why so many of these guys yell offensive names at women on the trails, or tell us to get off the trails, and generally act discourteously. Meanwhile, we've got bicycle advocates saying that some classes of e-bikes are assistive devices for persons with disabilities under the ADA. And in some jurisdictions, courts have held that some classes of e-bikes are legal on any trails where non-motorized bikes are allowed. Of course, people with disabilities are entitled to their necessary accommodations for trail access. But what's the Park District going to do to ensure that the rest of us, the not very nimble to jump out of the way, the hard of hearing, and the autistic people who are hiking on the trail or riding horses also have safe access? This is really a game changer in the estimation of a lot of equestrians who are very nervous about the increasing presence of e-bikes. Next slide, please.
Okay, Amelia, I need to interrupt you just for a second. I don't know how many more slides there are, but we really want the full group to have an opportunity to discuss these issues. So if you and Gary, I don't know if we're going to have time for Gary. I just really want to, I think, you know, we need to make respect.
I hope we are, Devin. I'll be fast when.
All right. Well, let's move through it so we can have time for the full group to deal with these issues. Thanks.
In conclusion.
Okay. Thank you. Well done. Well done.
Conclusion. Hikers and horses have shared trails together for centuries. The bikes are the new addition that have introduced the trail conflicts. Bikers maintain that if they have more trail access, there will be fewer conflicts, and there's really no evidence to support that. With all of these factors taken into consideration, it seems that having separate trails for hikers' horses versus bikes and e-bikes is the way to go. You can't do it everywhere, but in brand new parklands, we can get the trails right the first time. So with that, this is the engineering piece. We love our public safety officers, but they can't be everywhere. We can educate, it won't reach the sociopaths. So let's have our education, our engineering, and our enforcement to the maximum. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. I'm Gary Fitz of the Tilden Wildcat Horsemen's Association. And my message here today is quick and simple, that we can't expect the parks to mediate all our problems. We can work together, and we must work together. Next, please. Okay, to understand equestrians, you have to understand that they feel they're a threatened minority. Next. We're threatened by loss of stables in rural lands. Next. And we're threatened by exclusion from open space, which has happened and is happening more and more. Next. And of course, as everybody has said, we're threatened by encounters with rogue vehicles. Next. So right now, our most pressing concern is trail safety. Go ahead. But cyclists also have their issues. They see lack of access to narrow or challenging trails and lack of representation in some trail planning. And so they have many concerns, but probably their most immediate concern is access. Next. No one is happy with the status quo, but there is a way forward. Next. And the way forward is collaboration between user groups. Rather than just complaining to the parks, we need to talk to each other. Okay? Trail sharing does not need to be a zero-sum game. With careful planning, our trail system could be both safer and more accessible. Next. Some trails can be built to be shared. Some trails can carry separated traffic. And as the people before me have said there are lots of other solutions, time sharing, flow control, and so on. Next. Equestrians and hikers can support expanded access for cyclists, and cyclists can support greater trail safety for everyone. Next. Here's an example. Back in 2017, East Bay Mud proposed opening some of its trails to bicycles. Next. 3 user groups, cyclists, equestrians, and hikers, work together on a joint proposal. Next. To open 2 of these trails and keep 2 closed for safety and environmental reasons. Next. We actually came to a written agreement to this effect, and you can read it on the TUG on the resource page. Next. So this was a safety access trade-off where no one got everything, but everyone came out ahead. Next. Another example, a subgroup of TUG members, cyclists, equestrians, and hikers are meeting now, next, to propose a collaborative planning process local to each park. Next. Possibly starting with an established park where trail conflicts are increasing. If the process works there, we could try it at newly opened parks too. Next. The idea is to give a voice to each user group at each park in trail design, access, and safety. Next. Here are some of the groups that are committed to collaboration, but everyone is welcome, and I'm sure most people here would say that collaboration is a good idea. Next. So everyone is welcome. Here's a draft proposal that we could start with, but anyone who wants to join in the discussion can send an email to join@saferiding.org. That's an email list for a discussion of these issues. Next. Of course, there's a lot more to talk about than just access and safety. We don't have time right now, but we hope to carry on in the email group with all these issues. And here are some examples of the details that we could go into. I don't know if we have time, but Morris had something he wanted to say about these issues. Do we?
We'll get some time later on in the meeting for that. But yes, this is good stuff. Are you just about done?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks to all of you who came and presented today to give us the perspective on equestrians, from staging all the way through the trail experience. I think we got a really good sense from each of you about what it's like out there. And because of our timing situation, I think what I'd like to do as we transition is to get the breakout groups to be really focused on the third question, which is, we've heard a lot about the goals that equestrians have and some of the issues. What do you all think might be some workable strategies for helping to mitigate some of the conflicts and improve the trail user experience for equestrians and for everyone? So let's focus on that third question for just about maybe about 15 minutes till about 11:30, and we'll call you back and have an opportunity to hear back what you all think about some of these strategies. Gary, I'm glad we did get to your presentation because it highlights the fact that one of the hopes of this working group is that it would spawn some energy and some inspiration to carry these ideas and discussions, as you all put it, in a more localized fashion. So our working group is looking to identify some strategies for new trails, and what I heard from you all is that you're interested in helping improve the experience on existing trails. And as you concluded with, if you can come up with some strategies there, that might give us some guidance for the new trail design. So with that, we are going to separate you all or assign you to breakout groups randomly. So I think there are 5 groups. We have a recorder taking notes of your discussion to help you. You're going to be self-facilitating. As I said, we'll take about 15 minutes. We'll let you know when it's just about time. And so you don't have to worry about taking notes, but we would like one of you all from each group to report back to the large group what some of the ideas that you all came up with. So please devote a little time at the end of your discussions to reflect on your notes and see what you'd like to bring back. Reminder to the staff in each working group to record your group. Press record at the bottom of the screen so we can have those. And anything else, Devin, that I forgot before we break?
Lou, I just saw that Austin had his hand up for a comment.
Okay, Austin?
Yeah, just quick question. I wanted to be really clear about the focus, and I think you touched on it, Lou, that this trail user working group, and if my understanding is that we're being asked to focus in on the unopened properties and to come up with ideas on how to design trails in areas that currently aren't open to public access, which is very different than talking about what we're going to do in the existing parks. And so is the brainstorming exercise right now to talk specifically about the land bank properties and how we would go about planning those, or is it more broadly to talk about how to reduce trail conflicts on all the parks that are currently open?
Yeah. Devin, do you want to respond to that? I mean, I've or do you want me to?
Yeah, Lou, why don't you? I mean, my gut feeling, thank you, Austin, for that clarification. It's been, ongoing for us this whole time through all these meetings, is that we do want you to focus on either land bank properties or new trails in existing parks. We don't want to take that off the table. But in terms of fixing the existing trails and our trail conflicts, that is, that's sort of ongoing for staff. And of course, we welcome conversation about it, but we're looking to this group for land bank property recommendations and new trails in existing parks.
Good. Great. So let's go ahead. Oh, Jim, do you have a quick question again? Want to get us to our great breakout groups?
Thanks. So I know you can't do it right now, but we haven't actually gotten any presentation on what the land bank properties are, where they are. So it's very hard to have context. And I would just say that I think these standards tend to go park wide. So we do end up bringing in what's happening now. They do affect what could happen in future parks. Anyway, having some data on land bank properties would be very helpful. Thanks.
Great. Okay, with that, Amanda, can you send folks to their breakout groups, and we'll reconvene at about 11:35 to hear some of the ideas that percolated out of those groups. We'll see you back here then.